Hi everyone, I'm Liz Collier. I'm the project lead for the Zero Tolerance Initiative at National Disability Services.
And I'm Dave Rolfe, Victorian Quality and Safeguards Manager with National Disability Services. Thanks for joining us. Today we'll be discussing creating positive cultures and the NDS Zero Tolerance Initiative. We'll look at what is a positive organisational culture and how you can foster one within your own organisation. We'll provide an overview of the NDS Zero Tolerance framework and look at the available resources. We'll discuss the NDS Empowerment Circle, and then we're going to watch a couple of films that we've recently created from our Positive Cultures films, one around power and control, and the other around structured opportunities. Some of the things we talk about today might make you feel uncomfortable, and if things do come up for you, it's okay to have a break if you need to. Feelings might come up during this session, later tonight, next week, in a month. Think about who you can talk to if you do require support, and this might be a friend, a colleague, a supervisor, a manager, or a family member. We provided the details there for Beyond Blue and Lifeline if you require extra support, and please use the services available to you via your organisation's Employee Assistance Program. Please remember, whenever you are addressing the topic of recognising and responding to abuse within your own organisations, remind people of the support services that are available to them, and be mindful of how discussing this topic may make some people feel. We thought we'd start the session today by watching a film, the first film from our Positive Cultures series. This film looks at what is a positive culture. Fostering a positive organisational culture within your own organisation is so important and should be a priority. And it's important that the people who use your services, your staff, managers, everyone in your organisation feels included, listened to, respected, and feels safe to speak up. Let's have a look at the film.
Positive cultures. A positive culture is one where every person is listened to and knows they are listened to.
Every person knows that they are equal.
Every person in the organisation feels safe, comfortable and confident to speak up about everything.
Every person feels valued, like their opinions matter.
And when people speak up, they are listened to and action is taken. What is a positive culture?
Does anyone have an example of when they've experienced a good culture within an organisation?
Having a positive culture in an organisation is about the values that organisation stands for, and that the people that are part of that organisation are really clear on those values. And again, this is a challenge for every human being, but to live the values that we talk about.
And we're all equal, so therefore we share bathrooms, we share cups, we share plates, we share toilets, we share everything.
It's when we feel confident and safe to speak up when there's something that we're passionate about, something that isn't quite right.
It isn't just about, again, a policy or a procedure or a form. It's about ensuring that you wrap around the culture a system that works for the person, not expecting a person to work for a system, which sometimes we as organisations fall into.
I experienced a good culture within an organisation. I was a participant in that service and I really didn't like the name, and I didn't like the way it was representing people with disability. I trusted the worker, and so I felt comfortable to share my concerns, and I felt that they really took them seriously, and that was important to me. And the person I was talking to said, that's not something that I can do anything about on my own, but I will take that to the people in the organisation that have some influence.
If the core relationships in which we're providing are about people who require support and their supporters, then how do you make sure that those people are the people who drive the conversations that happen 3 tiers and 4 tiers up?
With support workers coming in my home, it's got to be a fit for all of us. It just can't be a fit for me. If, my daughter don't get along with them, or hubby don't get along with them, then it's not going to work. So
And that's a big change with the NDIS, as we can choose our own support workers. That's really interesting because that's about the person with a disability actually taking the lead in creating the positive organisation, even if that organisation is as small as your family.
It's always nice to start with a video, and hopefully that will help you to start thinking about positive cultures within your own organisation and what you're doing to create those cultures. We'll come back to that towards the end of the session. We're really interested in hearing from you. We're going to talk now about the Zero Tolerance Framework, and hopefully lots of you have already seen the framework and you're already using it in your own organisations. The framework was developed by NDIS in consultation with a whole lot of people across the country in 2014. So NDIS worked with people with disability, with service providers, advocacy organisations, academics, and government and statutory bodies to look at what are the things that we need to do to address abuse, neglect and violence toward people with disability. The framework is similar to prevention frameworks that you might have seen used in other sectors, but there were some key things that really needed to be addressed, and that was that we didn't have a shared understanding of what we mean when we talk about abuse. And also that while there are a lot of universal things that we can be doing, we need to recognise that there are some specific risks for some groups of people and some service settings. So we talk about understanding abuse, which encompasses promoting and applying human rights, and understanding the causes of abuse, recognising risk factors and signs of abuse. We talk about practices and safeguards that can help prevent abuse. So that's your policies and practice that protect people's rights, how we support and empower people with disability, and how we create the right organisational cultures. We talk about addressing risks for specific groups and service settings. So targeted approaches for groups at increased risk of abuse, and that includes people with intellectual disability, women with disability, children, people from culturally diverse backgrounds and from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander backgrounds, and people who require communication support. We also recognise that there are some service settings that have increased risk, so that might be institutional or group home settings. And we look at reducing and eliminating restrictive practices because we know that there's a strong relationship between people who are subject to restrictive practices and abuse, neglect and violence. We look at responding to abuse, so early intervention and response, how we support people when something happens, and how organisations can meet their legal and organisational requirements. And we look at analysis, learning and improvement, so maintaining and analysing records, continuous improvement, and supporting initiatives to reduce abuse. So you can print the Zero Tolerance Framework from the website, and you'll see that there's a more detailed version that sits behind this one that really can help you think about what you're already doing in your organisation and where you might need to put some extra focus. NDIS have been working with lots of people over the last 4 or 5 years to develop some resources that can help you to implement the framework. So under Understanding Abuse, we've created 2 e-learning programs. One of those is called Human Rights and You, and the other is called Understanding Abuse. And Understanding Abuse has quite a detailed set of resources that can help you to keep the conversation going. Under Practices and Safeguards that can help prevent abuse, there's some great practice advice on safer recruitment and screening and on supervision and safety, and the Positive Cultures films that we're discussing today. Under Addressing Risk for Specific Groups and Service Settings, there's some great films around recognising restrictive practices, so looking at the misuse of restrictive practices and how we can do things differently. Under Responding to Abuse, there's a set of 8 films that can help you think about what to do and how best to support someone when something happens and how to make sure that we're not getting in the way of justice. And under Analysis, Learning and Improvement, there's a Safeguarding for Boards guide that looks at what boards can be doing and what can be happening within an organisation to prevent abuse, neglect and violence toward people with disability. All of the resources, as I said, are free. They're freely available on the NDIS Zero Tolerance website. we're really interested in what you're using and how you're using it. So please do get in touch if there's things that you're doing that you think we'd like to hear about. They're all designed to be used flexibly within your own organisation's policies and procedures. We're going to keep working with all of you, hopefully, to continue to develop resources that can support you to implement the framework. So in terms of how you can use the resources, there's lots of different ways, and as I said, we're really interested in hearing from you, but we know that they can be used in board meetings, as part of induction, during ongoing staff training, as part of supervision, during staff meetings or team discussions, in personal reflection, and with people with disability, families and carers. And really the main thing that we want to say is it's important to keep the conversation going.
So when we're talking about abuse and neglect, it's important to remember that abuse and neglect can be deliberate, accidental, or systemic. We know that there's perpetrators who target people with a disability as a deliberate act. But we also know that sometimes staff don't actually realise that their actions are abuse, or they don't understand the impact that their actions are having on the people who they're supporting. This is where abuse and neglect can be accidental. And finally, abuse and neglect can be systemic, where staff are not trained or supervised properly, where staff don't have the resources to do their job, where there's insufficient staff due to high sick leave or staff turnover, or where people are forced to live with others who pose a risk. It doesn't matter what the cause is. The person who's experiencing the abuse and neglect is probably not wondering whether the abuse is deliberate, accidental, or systemic. They're also not wondering whether the abuse is emotional abuse or financial abuse. What matters is the impact on the person. And this is where our focus needs to be. We're going to watch another film now, and this is from our Understanding Abuse e-learning program. This film demonstrates how power and control is used in seemingly subtle ways and shows how much this can hurt others and limit their choices. Let's have a look.
How about this scenario?
I'm starving. Will you give me a steak sandwich?
Sorry, Maylene. Beef isn't very sustainable, and you shouldn't be eating red meat. It leaves a very large carbon footprint.
Carbon what?
I got you a tofu burger instead.
What the hell is tofu?
Tofu. It's vegan, and it's good for you. You can eat meat while Joe is here, but while I'm around, I'd prefer you ate some more vegetables.
In this scene, you're exerting control over Maylene. Which of these factors is influencing your behaviour?
So you can see that films such as this enable a way for you to open up a conversation with the people who you work with and start to understand the different forms of abuse and where power and control can have an influence. It opens up a number of questions, this film. The first question I'll be asking is, how do you think Maylene is feeling in this situation?
I'd be feeling pretty furious personally if someone brought me a tofu burger when I was waiting for a steak sandwich. I think one of the other interesting questions is, what do you think's going on for Alex? So do you think that he thinks he's doing anything wrong? And I don't think that he does. I think that he's coming at this with the best of intentions in a way that he thinks is a good way to support someone and isn't recognising the impact that that's having on Maylene.
And at the end of the day, Alex is imposing his values on Maylene and not really recognising what her choice is in the matter. I think another interesting part of this is that Alex says that when Joe is on, that Maylene can eat meat, but not while he's around. So again, he's providing two alternatives to Maylene, but neither of those alternatives are actually what she wants.
I think that can be really confusing for people and definitely something that we see in the way that people are supported.
We're now going to ask the question, what makes a good life? And I'll get you to have a think about that for yourself. From my perspective, what makes a good life for me? I like nature. I like spending time with my friends and family. I enjoy my career. I enjoy learning new things. I enjoy socialising. What about you, Liz?
I like eating food and I like talking about food in great detail. They're two things that are really important to me.
We've all got things which make up our life and makes our life a good life. There's things around your health and your body, your life in the community, who you are and what you believe, your identity, material things, so your home and your other things, your job and your money, and whether that's through your work or money that you might receive through other sources. Education. We all love learning new things. Relationships, who are the people in your life that make your life a good life. And then emotional, how you feel. So recognising that all of us have all of these various life areas which contribute to the way we feel. When everything's feeling good and we're feeling good in each of these life domains, life's feeling pretty great. But what happens when one of those domains, such as emotional, is affected, and when we're not feeling so good, when we're feeling anxious or perhaps depressed? In that situation, would you say, oh, it's all right, 7 out of 8, things are going pretty well, it's not too bad? You probably wouldn't, because we know that when one of those life areas is not going so well, it actually puts the rest of them out of balance and can affect all of the different ones. So if you're not feeling so great emotionally, it might affect how often you go out into the community. It might affect how you're feeling about yourself and your identity. It might stop you from seeking your education or going to school or going to work. So using the concept of the life domains, NDS came up with the NDS Empowerment Circle. The Empowerment Circle is a tool to help you think about how people can be more empowered in all of the areas of their life. We know that abuse, neglect, and poor practice can happen in every one of these life areas, and the Empowerment Circle is a good way to help you think about ways to support people to be more empowered in each of these areas through good practice. When we think about abuse, neglect, and violence towards people with disability, we shouldn't only consider the criminal and reportable incidents reflected in the red circle around the outside. We also need to think about all of those everyday experiences of poor practice, neglect, and misuse of power that people might experience. So the Empowerment Circle is a visual representation of this, and a good way of explaining it. As I said, the red outer edge of the circle represents abusive and criminal practice. The orange shading represents layers of poor practice and disempowerment. And the green area represents good practice, with the person in the middle representing empowerment and control over all of the areas in their life. So to give an example, if we take the economic slice, obviously it would be criminal practice if a support worker was, for example, stealing someone's money, the person who they're supporting's money. However, we know that there's a whole range of things that can and do occur which aren't great practice. For example, a support worker might not provide the opportunity to the person they're supporting to actually use their own money when out in the community and spend money on things that they would like to purchase. They might hold on to the person's money, purchase items for them, and not actually educate or support them to have a greater understanding of what that money is for or that it's theirs. We know that there's a whole range of steps that can take place there to support the person to be more empowered, to have their own money, to know that they can use it for their own things, and to choose what they want to spend it on. The Empowerment Circle can be used in a whole range of different ways. So you can use it to work with the person to identify things that you can do to support them in each of these different life areas. We can use it to explain what we're talking about when we're talking about abuse, neglect, and violence, and help people to understand that we're not just talking about criminal acts, and that we are talking about a whole range of things that can occur in each of these different life areas. You can use the Empowerment Circle to reflect on your own life, or in team meetings. It's particularly useful in training. Academic bodies have used the Empowerment Circle to start to look at restrictive practices and how we can move towards good practice and avoid the misuse of restrictive practices. Or it can be used one slice at a time and really focus on each of those individual life areas and move towards good practice.
One of the things that we ask for people and organisations to do is to make a commitment. So to make the zero tolerance commitment that asks people and organisations to speak up and take action on anything that doesn't support a person's rights anything that might make a person feel or be unsafe, and recognising that they're two different things and that they're both important, and anything that they could be doing better. So going back to the video before with Alex in it, you can see that there's a conversation that needs to be had there. And so this is really about making the commitment to do that, to agree together as a group that that's what you will do when you see things that you could be doing better. This can be really hard. As we talk to people in teams and organisations, some teams will say, of course we do that, that's my job. Of course we do that. And other organisations or other teams will say, I don't know where I would start with that. That doesn't feel like something that that's achievable. So partly that's the reason why we've created all these films as conversation starters, to help you to kind of take a step back and have some of these conversations about things that you're seeing and practice that. But it's also why we did the work that we've just done on the Positive Cultures films. So we wanted to look at how do we create an organisation that is responsive to this commitment, and that does enable people to feel valued, safe and comfortable to speak up about a whole range of things. But also, how can we support each person to recognise their role in creating a positive culture? We wanted to look at a whole lot of different perspectives when we talk about positive cultures. We need to recognise every person within an organisation. So we spoke to 4 peer workers, to a support worker, a manager, a chief operating officer, an advocate, and a representative from the NDIS Commission about what organisations can do so that every person feels valued, safe and comfortable to speak up. And we've ended up with 8 short films covering the following topics. So you saw part of the Positive Cultures film at the start of this session that looks at what do we mean when we talk about a positive culture. Power and Control continues the conversation that we have throughout all of these resources, where we look at where power imbalances exist and what we can do to address them. Speaking up, so what makes it easy to speak up, what makes it hard, and what we can do as organisations to make sure that people feel comfortable to do it. Listening well, what does that look like? What are some of the everyday opportunities? So we know that you might have great complaints processes or great formal processes. What are the everyday opportunities that you can use to build relationships, to build trust, and to create opportunities where people can be having the conversations that they need to have? Structured opportunities, so how do we make things like meetings and complaints processes more inclusive for everyone? Having the right supports in place. It's important that organisations are not trying to do everything themselves, that sometimes people may need support from advocacy or from counselling or from the police, and that people know how to access those supports. And then finally looking at the way we use language, because we know that some of the language that we use and that we've historically used and that we continue to use can hurt people and can change the way people are perceived. So we really wanted to talk about that. There's a short guide to help you start some conversations in your organisation and look at what you can be doing to create a positive culture. We're going to watch a couple of those films now. So we will start with the film around Power and Control.
Power and Control.
Power can be used in good and bad ways.
Some people have more power than others, and this is true in every part of our lives. When we talk about having a positive culture in a workplace, we need to think about what we can do so everyone can use their own personal power.
Power imbalances in relationships.
A lot of people have made a lot of decisions for me about my life. I feel very angry and very sad about this.
I think when we talk about power dynamics, there are the absolute unacceptable, reportable kind of breaches of power. As well as that, there are lots of little everyday experiences that people have where power is taken. It might be choices around what you're going to have to eat. It might be choices around what product you should buy when you go shopping. It's like, oh, you want this cheese grater because it's cheaper. you know, and it's about saying, well, no, actually, I'm going to choose the cheese grater.
I think it's really important that support workers are aware that they have more power.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely to have that in front of their brain all the time, because it's very easy to be subtle about those things, and with all the best intentions you can take someone's power away when you are in a position of being more powerful.
We've spoken before around that concept of being friendly but not being friends. Did you want to open up a little bit more about that, Kath?
It's a challenge to maintain a working relationship with a support worker. It's about trying to have a friendly relationship but not become friends. Because when you become friends, then you do take on what's happening for them, and you do take on those bad days that they come and tell you that they're having, and you do sort of change what you ask for and how you feel about it.
The power of language and information.
What about language? Do you think that language and the language that we use has an impact on power and dynamics?
Because it shapes our attitudes to each other, I think it's sort of the foundation of the way we think about speaking up and just everyday interaction.
And then I suppose a related conversation around language is information. When we're supporting someone, there's always a lot of information that a lot of people have access to. So how does that affect power and dynamics?
I feel worried. You get really upset and start talk about me to other people about things that they shouldn't, even to taxi drivers. This is my private information, and I should get to choose who I share this information with.
What we often see in the lives of people with disability is that it's sometimes their history and their reputation and a deficit medical model that takes the precedence, and it really, really upsets people.
Instead of the medical model where it says this person might hit you, this person does this person has this issue, it should be this person loves to do this person likes it when they have a shower with extra water on their face.
How can we use the power we have?
How can we use that power in a positive way to ensure that we're empowering other people?
By sharing it, telling our stories.
Attending self-advocacy groups and talking about it and empowering other people who's gone through the same, and to let them know it's okay to speak up.
It might be just talking to a support worker about not speaking on my behalf. I was in a public place recently, and the new support worker thought she was helping by saying that something was really important to me. And so after that, I just kind of said, hey, I really appreciate what you were trying to do, but it's up to me to speak for myself, and I'm still learning to practice that in my late 40s. And so in that small way, I just try to take a little bit of power back.
As supporters, we make assumptions every day around what people's capacity are, and it's really not great. And so knowing what that looks like and then taking steps to make sure that that power imbalance is as evened out as possible.
What can organisations do?
What can organisations do to address the imbalances that may arise?
Actually listening to what people want, asking the question and listening.
The importance of people with disability being at every level of the organisation if we are going to be able to influence the power dynamics in an organisation. So not just the recipients of services, on the board, in management, at every single level of decision making. There's just no excuses anymore.
How can you recognise where power is not shared equally? What can you do about it? This film is an NDS Zero Tolerance initiative funded by the Victorian Government.
So you can see there's lots of conversations that can come out of watching that film, and that's what we really hope that you can all now do within your own organisations. Have a viewing of the film, and that viewing doesn't necessarily just need to be with a group of support workers. Perhaps watch the film with some people who use services, support workers, a manager, a senior manager. Have all of those people in the room and enable conversation and reflective practice around the films and some of the conversations that come out of them. So in terms of looking at a couple of those questions, Liz, how can you recognise where power is not shared equally? What are your thoughts on that first one?
I think it's an interesting one, and I know in the film there's a lot of conversation about that relationship between a person who uses services and a support worker and the power imbalance that exists there, but we also need to look at all of our relationships and recognise where power imbalances might be. I think for me, I find it easy to recognise and feel where I'm the person who has less power in a relationship, but not always so easy to see where I might have more power. And I think sometimes if you're not recognising that there's a power imbalance, it might be because it's something that you're benefiting from. So really kind of taking time to think about that. What about you?
I think of it as an act of mindfulness of sorts. So yeah, like you say, it's being mindful of where your power lies in a relationship, and being mindful of where you may have more power than another person in a relationship or a particular situation, but also being mindful of where your power is being imposed upon, or you're feeling powerless in a relationship. And both of those are equally as important to recognise, whether that's in our professional lives, our personal lives, or certainly throughout our organisations. So it's a really prominent issue, which I think we need to shine a light on and get people talking about. And that ties into the next comment around what can you do about it. I think it does come back to conversation and being feeling comfortable and creating cultures where people feel comfortable to raise it if they're not feeling as though they're being listened to, they're being respected, they're being heard, and they're not feeling as though the power dynamics are equal and balanced. If we can create a healthy organisational culture, then we've got an opportunity there for people to be able to express how they're feeling in different situations.
Yeah, and I agree with everything you're saying. I also like what Tanya was talking about when she was talking about how we can use our power, and she talks about sharing by telling stories. I think that's an important one, no matter sort of where you're at or who you are in an organisation, that through sharing our stories and celebrating the things that we do well and celebrating our achievements, that we can kind of help people to feel their own power, and we can share that.
So we'll leave you to have a further think about those questions and hopefully have those discussions within your own organisations. We're going to watch another film now. This one's around structured opportunities. So looking at meetings and complaints processes and how we can focus on doing those better. Let's have a look at the film.
Structured opportunities.
Structured opportunities include things like meetings, feedback forms, and complaints processes.
There are lots of ways to make this more positive and include everyone.
Meetings and planning processes.
So structured opportunity is about a person with a disability says something somewhere, a support worker reflects that somewhere, that goes to supervisors, that goes somewhere, and something changes. It's really important.
I just started having planning meetings with my friends and supporters. People who believe in me and support me to do what I want to do. These meetings are really important for me to help me stay strong. We talk about things that cheese me off, things that are going well and things that make me happy. We make a plan together. This really helps me to speak up about things I want to change.
I did the same thing as Rob, as a mapping plan process. But you can also make a video as well. You can make a video of your plan. The things that you want in your life, having family, having friends, and the things that you really want to succeed in life.
I loved how you talk about the videos. There's so many different ways that a planning process can look for people. It can be done with photos, it can be done with videos, it can be done with regular conversations, but some way of documenting that in a way that's meaningful for the person.
It's just that fantastic energy that comes from collaborating, so that you think about your own life differently, and the people in that group have a sense of what they can contribute.
I think meetings are a great place to resolve issues, but they're also a great time to share stories and share positivity about things that are going well.
Because quite often people will identify with good things and think, I might be able to do that, how can I do that?
And I think it's really important in meetings that part of that structured opportunity is making sure that everyone can participate in the way that they need to.
So there's some stuff around being able to just go, this is what I need, and everybody having that conversation really early so that it can work.
People have got to know why they're there, what they're planning to do there, who's there, and what we hope to walk away with.
Why is it important for people with disability to be involved in meetings and decision-making processes?
We are the expert in our own lives.
There's of course that really well-known important idea of nothing about us without us. So if we want to make systems and processes and ultimately the lives of people with disability, for those lives to thrive, that can't happen without the input and the contribution and the priorities of people with disability.
There's nothing worse when there's a meeting to discuss something and the people who are majorly impacted are not present.
How dare you have a conversation about my life, which goes to all levels of service provision, without me being part of that conversation?
We've got to prove, that we're equal to them. We just need to be included.
Complaints processes.
So what do people think about complaints processes?
A little bit like meetings, I think that complaints processes can make people feel really excluded and alienated.
For a person to actually give feedback or to complain, it should be incredibly simple. People shouldn't have to fill in forms. They shouldn't have to go to a particular individual. Someone should be able to speak to whomever they feel comfortable with.
It's not like a complaint process only ever gets triggered when they say, I would like to make a complaint. It might be as simple as something's gone wrong for me, or this happened to me today and I'm not happy about it at my service, or I'm really worried about such and such, and that should be enough to trigger a process that might end up in an improvement or a resolution.
If I've developed the courage to speak up, I want to know that one, I'm being listened to, but part of that listening is that action is going to be taken and that I'm involved in that process. There's no point saying that we welcome feedback or we welcome complaints with the big smile and the wonderful document and the beautiful pictures if we don't take action.
How are people with disability involved in decision-making processes in your organisation? What do you do to make sure meetings work for everyone? How do people make complaints or give feedback? This film is an NDS Zero Tolerance initiative funded by the Victorian Government.
So there's some questions there that you can think about and have a conversation about what you're doing in your organisation to make sure that people are actively involved in decision-making processes, meetings, and have the right support around complaints processes. I think it comes back to really what Jen was saying in the previous video where she talks about the need for people with disability to be involved at all levels of organisations in order to shift the power imbalances that exist, and creating more inclusive, structured opportunities for people to be involved is a really good practical way of doing that. What do you think, Dave?
I think it's worth pointing out as well that with the NDIS practice standards, there's actually a requirement now. One of the quality indicators under governance and operations in the core module actually talks specifically to the need to involve the people who you support in the decision-making processes around decisions that affect their lives and the overall governance of the organisation. So it is time to start really thinking about how you can do this well in your organisation and take the time to reflect on how well are you currently doing it. I think historically, across the disability sector, this is something that we haven't done well and we need to recognise that. But there are ways to do it. We know that it takes more time, and we know that it takes a considered effort to ensure that the people who use your services are included in a meaningful way and not a tokenistic manner. It's important that people have that opportunity not just once, but that they are regularly provided the opportunity to have discussions and provide feedback and direction into what it is that they would like from the organisation. I guess the other thing that would be good to mention is that there's a fantastic organisation called Voice at the Table. They're based here in Melbourne, and they've developed a range of resources which can support you within your organisation to have inclusive meeting practices, particularly for people with cognitive disabilities, and that includes intellectual disability and acquired brain injury. So Voice at the Table is a project of the Self-Advocacy Resource Unit, SARU, and it aims to increase the number of people with cognitive disabilities sitting on boards, committees and advisory groups within government, service providers, community and mainstream organisations at a local, state and national level. Throughout the project that Liz and I have been involved in over the last year, we've worked to really support people with disability to be involved in the meetings that we've had, in the planning process of the development of resources, in the delivery of workshops and forums, and we really hope that you can look at other ways that you can be doing so within your own organisations also.
So it's definitely worth checking out their website. They've got a whole range of resources on their website, which include videos and the top 10 tips. As Dave said, we've been using them to make our meetings more inclusive, and it's something that that I've found really useful, that I think a lot of people who have attended our meetings found really useful. So definitely worth checking out.
We're really keen for you to contact us also. We'd like to know how you're using the Zero Tolerance Framework and the associated resources to meet the new quality and safeguarding requirements under the NDIS Commission. All of the resources are available via the NDS Zero Tolerance website, and the link is there. But please do feel free to send me an email if you have any queries, or if you have any stories around how you're using those resources within your own organisation and what the impact has been for the people who use your services and the staff within your organisations also. How have people been receiving the resources, and how have you found them useful? Which leads us to a final exercise, which we're hoping that you'll all participate in now. Using the discussion board, we'd like to create an opportunity where you can share with us how you're using the Zero Tolerance Framework and the associated resources within your own organisations. But also you might want to respond to, how do you foster a positive culture within your organisation to ensure everyone feels safe, listened to, respected and safe to speak up? So please take the time to share those stories with us now, and we look forward to hearing all of the great things that are occurring within your organisations as you continue to foster positive organisational cultures. Thanks so much.
Thank you.